Thunder's legs buckled beneath him as the cruel rider's whip came down again, the old champion's eyes reflecting nothing but pain and defeat. Without hesitation, 10-year-old Lily Anderson vaulted over the arena fence and planted herself between abuser and victim, her voice ringing out with a courage that silenced the entire rodeo. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The Fairview County Rodeo was always the biggest event of the summer, drawing people from all corners of the state with its promise of excitement, competition, and glory. The air buzzed with anticipation as crowds filled the wooden bleachers surrounding the dusty arena. Vendors called out, hawking everything from cotton candy to cowboy hats, while country music blared from speakers mounted on tall poles. For most, it was a day of celebration and entertainment, but for Thunder it was just another day of pain. Thunder had once been the pride of Willow Creek Ranch, a magnificent quarter horse with a gleaming chestnut coat and a spirit that matched his name. In his prime, he had been a champion barrel racer, moving with such speed and precision that spectators would hold their breath in awe as he rounded each barrel with mere inches to spare. His powerful muscles rippling beneath his coat, Thunder and his rider Sarah Jenkins had been unbeatable, setting county records that stood to this day. But that was 15 years ago. Now, at 23, Thunder was considered ancient in the competitive rodeo world. His once gleaming coat had dulled and gray hairs peppered his muzzle. Years of pushing his body to the limit had taken their toll. His joints ached with arthritis, and the spark in his eyes had dimmed to a flicker. Yet despite his age and declining health, Thunder's owner, Maxwell Reed, refused to let him retire. Reed was a hard man, known throughout the circuit for his ruthless pursuit of victory and profit. When Sarah had moved away 5 years ago, unable to take Thunder with her to her new life in the city, Reed had purchased the aging horse for a fraction of what he'd once been worth. It wasn't out of sentiment. Reed had calculated that Thunder's reputation alone would bring in money through breeding fees and appearances. But as Thunder grew older and his ailments worsened, Reed's treatment of him became increasingly harsh, pushing the horse well beyond what his aging body could handle. This particular rodeo was meant to be Thunder's final appearance before Reed sold him to a Mexican slaughterhouse, a fact known only to Reed and his ranch hand, Carlos, who had secretly grown fond of the old horse and disagreed with Reed's decision. But money was tight, and Carlos had a family to feed, so he kept his opinions to himself, though each day he spent with Thunder weighed heavier on his conscience. Among the crowd that day was 10-year-old Lily Anderson, sitting beside her father in the front row. Lily's love for horses ran deep in her blood. Her bedroom walls were covered with posters of magnificent equines, and her bookshelves were lined with every horse book she could find. She'd been taking riding lessons at a local stable for 2 years, saving every penny from her allowance to pay for them. "Dad, look at that old horse," Lily said, pointing toward the warm-up area where Thunder stood with his head hanging low. "He looks so sad." James Anderson followed his daughter's gaze and frowned. Even from a distance, he could tell the horse was in poor condition. "He does seem tired, honey. He's probably an older horse." "Why would they make him perform if he's tired?" Lily asked, her brow furrowing with concern. James sighed, unsure how to explain the harsh realities of the world to his sensitive daughter. "Sometimes people don't always do what's best for animals, Lily. They're thinking about other things." Lily's eyes remained fixed on Thunder as Reed yanked roughly on his lead rope, forcing the horse to move faster despite his obvious discomfort. Something about the old horse touched her deeply, stirring a protective instinct she couldn't explain. As the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers introducing the next event, Reed led Thunder toward the arena. It was a simple exhibition, a chance for spectators to see a legendary champion up close. Reed had promised the rodeo organizers that Thunder would perform a few basic maneuvers, nothing strenuous, but enough to impress the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice echoed, please give a warm welcome to Thunder, three-time state barrel racing champion and holder of the county record that still stands unbroken today. The crowd applauded as Reed led Thunder into the center of the arena. The old horse moved with obvious pain, each step careful and measured as if walking on glass. Lily leaned forward in her seat, her small hands gripping the railing in front of her. "Dad, something's wrong with him," she whispered urgently. "He's hurting." Reed, dressed in an elaborate Western outfit complete with gleaming silver spurs, bowed dramatically to the crowd before mounting Thunder. The horse's back dipped under the man's weight, and a tremor ran through his legs. Still, Thunder stood steady, years of training overriding his body's protests. Reed dug his heels into Thunder's sides, urging him forward. The old horse took a few labored steps, then broke into a slow, stiff trot around the arena's perimeter. The crowd's enthusiasm dimmed as they observed the struggling animal. This was not the spectacular champion they had been promised. Annoyed by the lukewarm reception, Reed yanked hard on the reins and drove his spurs deeper into Thunder's flanks. The horse let out a soft whicker of pain but picked up speed, his breathing growing labored, foam beginning to fleck his neck. "Come on, you worthless nag," Reed hissed, loud enough for those in the front rows to hear. "Earn your keep one last time." Lily's eyes widened at the cruel words. She watched as Thunder strained to obey, his once proud gait now a pale shadow of its former glory. Then, as Reed forced him into a tight turn, the old horse's right front leg buckled beneath him. Thunder stumbled, nearly going down before catching himself. The crowd gasped and Reed's face contorted with fury. He yanked the reins savagely, pulling Thunder's head up and to the side. "Don't you dare embarrass me," he growled, raising his riding crop. The crop came down hard across Thunder's withers, causing the horse to flinch in pain. A murmur of discomfort rippled through the audience. Reed, oblivious to their reaction, struck Thunder again, demanding that he perform. "Stop it!" Lily's voice rang out clear and high above the crowd's murmurs. "You're hurting him." Reed turned toward the sound, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the small girl leaning over the railing. "Mind your own business, kid," he called back with a dismissive wave. "This is my horse and he'll do what I say." Thunder stood trembling in the center of the arena, his sides heaving with exertion, sweat darkening his neck and flanks. His eyes, once bright with spirit, now reflected only pain and resignation. Reed raised his crop again, determined to force one last performance from the broken animal. But before the blow could fall, a small figure vaulted over the railing and raced across the dusty arena floor. Lily, driven by a courage she didn't know she possessed, planted herself firmly between Reed and Thunder, her arms spread wide in a protective gesture. The crowd fell silent, stunned by the child's bold action. "He's too old," Lily shouted, her voice trembling but determined. "Can't you see he's in pain? Please stop hurting him." Reed sat frozen atop Thunder, the crop still raised, his face flushing with anger and embarrassment as hundreds of eyes turned to him in judgment. The silence stretched, taut as a wire, as everyone waited to see what would happen next. James Anderson watched in horror as his daughter confronted the angry rider in the middle of the arena. Leaping to his feet, he rushed toward the railing, his heart pounding in his chest. "Lily!" he called out, fear evident in his voice. But his daughter stood her ground, her small frame dwarfed by the massive horse and his furious rider. Reed's face contorted with rage as he glared down at the child. "Get out of my way, girl," he snarled, his knuckles white around the crop. "This isn't your business." But Lily remained steadfast, her eyes brimming with tears yet defiant. "It is my business," she declared, her voice carrying across the now silent arena. "It's everyone's business when someone hurts an animal." Thunder, sensing the tension, shifted uncomfortably, his breathing still labored. but something in the girl's presence seemed to calm him, and he lowered his head slightly, almost touching her shoulder with his muzzle. Reed made a move to dismount, clearly intending to physically remove Lily from his path, when a voice boomed through the arena's speaker system. "Hold on there, folks." The rodeo announcer, a veteran cowboy named Frank Dempsey, had been watching the scene unfold with growing concern. "Seems we have a situation here. Young lady, what's your name?" Lily looked up toward the announcer's booth, momentarily startled by the amplified voice. "Lily Anderson, sir." "Well, Miss Lily Anderson," Frank continued, his voice gentler now, "why don't you tell us what's got you so upset?" Reed cut in before Lily could respond. "This is ridiculous. Get this kid out of here so we can continue the show." But the crowd's mood had shifted. What had begun as mere discomfort at the treatment of the old horse had crystallized into something more potent, a collective indignation sparked by one child's courage. "Let her speak," someone shouted from the stands. Others joined in, calling for Lily to be heard. Frank, sensing the crowd's sentiment, made a decision. "Mr. Reed, I think we'd all like to hear what the young lady has to say." Lily swallowed hard, suddenly aware that hundreds of eyes were on her. She glanced back at Thunder, whose gentle brown eyes seemed to give her strength. "This horse is too old and sick to be performing," she began, her voice gaining confidence. "He's in pain with every step. Look at how he's breathing, how his legs are shaking. My riding teacher says we should always respect horses and listen to what they're telling us with their bodies, and his body is saying he's suffering." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several people nodded, particularly those who knew enough about horses to recognize the signs Lily was pointing out. Reed scoffed loudly. "The kid doesn't know what she's talking about. Thunder here is just being stubborn. He's got plenty of good years left." Carlos, who had been watching nervously from the sidelines, could no longer remain silent. He stepped forward into the arena, removing his hat respectfully as he approached. "Mr. Reed," he said quietly, though in the silence his voice carried, "the girl is right. Thunder is 23 years old. He has severe arthritis in his hocks and fetlocks. The vet told us last month that he shouldn't be ridden at all anymore." Reed's face darkened dangerously. "You're fired, Carlos. Get your things and be off my property by sundown." Carlos nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir. But it doesn't change the truth." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, more indignant. James Anderson had made his way to the gate and was now entering the arena, moving swiftly toward his daughter. "Lily," he called, his voice stern but tinged with pride, "you come back here right now." But as he reached his daughter's side, instead of pulling her away, he placed a protective hand on her shoulder and faced Reed. "My daughter's right. This horse needs medical attention, not a performance." Reed, realizing he was losing control of the situation, decided to cut his losses. With a disgusted grunt, he dismounted roughly, causing Thunder to flinch as the saddle shifted on his sore back. "Fine," Reed spat, throwing the reins to the ground. "If you all care so much about this broken-down nag, you deal with him. I'm done wasting my time." He stormed toward the exit, but Frank's voice stopped him. "Mr. Reed, before you go, there's something you should know. As the organizer of this rodeo, I have the authority to report animal cruelty to the proper authorities, and I believe what we've witnessed here today qualifies." Reed froze, then slowly turned back. "You wouldn't dare." "I would," Frank replied calmly. "Unless, of course, you'd be willing to surrender ownership of Thunder to someone who will provide him with proper care." A tense silence fell over the arena as Reed considered his options. His jaw worked as he calculated the potential costs: legal fees, fines, damage to his reputation. Finally, with a bitter laugh, he shook his head. "Take him," he said dismissively. "The worthless animal was headed to the slaughterhouse anyway. He's nothing but a liability now." Gasps and cries of outrage echoed from the stands at this callous admission. Lily's hand flew to her mouth in horror, and she instinctively moved closer to Thunder as if to shield him from Reed's cruel words. "The slaughterhouse?" she whispered, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. Carlos stepped forward again. "It's true," he confirmed grimly. "Mr. Reed made arrangements last week. Thunder was to be shipped out tomorrow morning." James Anderson looked down at his daughter, then at the old horse who stood quietly beside her, his noble head lowered in exhaustion. Making a decision that would change all their lives, he addressed Frank directly. "We'll take him," he said firmly. "My daughter and I. We have a small place with a few acres. It's not much, but it's enough for one old horse to live out his days in peace." Lily looked up at her father in astonishment, joy blooming across her tear-stained face. "Really, Dad? We can take him home?" James nodded, a smile tugging at his lips despite the seriousness of the situation. "Yes, Lily, if that's what you want." "It is," she said fervently, turning back to Thunder and gently stroking his neck. "I want him to be happy and safe." Frank nodded approvingly. "Well then, it sounds like we need to make this official." He looked pointedly at Reed. "Mr. Reed, do you agree to surrender ownership of Thunder to the Anderson family with no compensation and no further claims?" Reed's face was a mask of contempt, but he recognized when he was beaten. "Whatever, just get him out of my sight." Frank gestured to a rodeo official nearby. "Get a bill of sale drawn up immediately. We'll need witnesses." As the paperwork was being arranged, Lily stood quietly with Thunder, whispering soothing words to him and gently stroking his sweaty neck. The old horse had relaxed noticeably, as if he understood that a fundamental change had just occurred in his circumstances. "It's okay now," Lily murmured, her small hand gentle on his weathered face. "You're coming home with us. No more rodeos, no more pain, just green grass and quiet days." Thunder's soft brown eyes seemed to reflect understanding, and he lowered his head even further, allowing Lily to reach up and scratch behind his ears. For the first time in years, something like peace settled over the old champion's weary frame. In the stands, the spectators watched this tableau with varying emotions, some wiping away tears, others nodding in satisfaction, all of them witnesses to an unexpected act of courage and compassion that had transformed what was meant to be a simple rodeo exhibition into something far more profound. The next hour passed in a whirlwind of activity. The rodeo continued with its scheduled events, but Thunder's story had captured the hearts of many in attendance. As James signed the hastily prepared bill of sale, making Thunder officially theirs, several people approached offering help, advice, and support. A local veterinarian named Dr. Elaine Martinez, who had been in the audience with her family, came forward immediately. "I'd like to examine him," she offered, her experienced eyes already assessing Thunder's condition. Free of charge, of course. James gratefully accepted, and Dr. Martinez conducted a gentle but thorough examination right there in a quiet corner of the arena's staging area. Her findings confirmed what was already apparent to those who had been watching. Thunder was suffering from severe arthritis, muscle atrophy, and general exhaustion. His teeth showed signs of neglect, and a few old injuries had never been properly treated. "He's in rough shape," Dr. Martinez admitted as she straightened up, "but nothing that can't be managed with proper care. Mostly he needs rest, good nutrition, and gentle exercise. No riding, though. His competition days are definitely behind him." Lily nodded solemnly, absorbing every word of the doctor's assessment. "I won't ride him," she promised. "I just want him to be happy." The veterinarian smiled at the earnest young girl. "That's exactly the right attitude. You know, horses like Thunder often make remarkable recoveries once they're in a loving environment. They're incredibly resilient animals." James, meanwhile, was facing a more practical challenge, how to transport Thunder to their small farm on the outskirts of town. They had driven to the rodeo in their family sedan, certainly not equipped to transport a horse, even an elderly one. Carlos, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward once again. "I can help with that," he offered. "I've got Reed's truck and horse trailer here. I was supposed to take Thunder to the—" He glanced at Lily and adjusted his words. "To his next destination tomorrow. But I'd be happy to drive him to your place instead." James hesitated, aware that Carlos had just lost his job because of this situation. "That's very generous, but won't that cause more trouble for you with Reed?" Carlos shrugged, a hint of defiance in his eyes. "Mr. Reed already fired me. What's he going to do, fire me again? Besides, this is the right thing to do. I should have stood up for Thunder long before today." While the adults sorted out the logistics, Lily remained by Thunder's side, talking softly to him and occasionally offering him sips of water from a bucket someone had brought. The old horse seemed to respond to her gentle presence, his eyes softer now, the tension gradually easing from his body. A farrier who had been scheduled to work at the rodeo offered to check Thunder's hooves and found them in desperate need of attention. "They haven't been properly trimmed in months," he reported, shaking his head in disgust. "I can do a basic trim now to make him more comfortable, but he'll need regular care going forward." Word of Thunder's plight had spread through the rodeo grounds, and a small crowd of well-wishers gathered, many offering practical help. An older woman who ran a feed store promised to deliver a special blend of senior horse feed to the Anderson farm. A teenage boy who worked at a tack shop brought over a soft, well-padded halter to replace the harsh one Reed had been using. By late afternoon, everything was arranged. Carlos had brought Reed's truck and horse trailer around to the loading area, and it was time to see if Thunder would willingly enter the trailer, often a stressful experience even for healthy, well-adjusted horses. "He might be difficult to load," Carlos warned. Reed was never patient with him, and Thunder's learned to fear the trailer. Lily looked up at the tall metal trailer with concern. "Is there anything we can do to make it easier for him?" Dr. Martinez, who had stayed to help, suggested, "Why don't you lead him, Lily? He seems to trust you. Just walk slowly, and if he balks, don't pull on him. Just stand quietly and give him time to decide." James watched nervously as his daughter took the lead rope. She seemed so small beside the massive horse, despite Thunder's diminished condition, but the connection between them was already evident as Lily spoke softly to Thunder, explaining what they were about to do, as if he could understand every word. "It's okay, Thunder," she reassured him. "This trailer is taking you to your new home. There's a nice pasture waiting for you, and a cozy barn for when it rains. You'll never have to perform again or go anywhere you don't want to go." To everyone's surprise, Thunder followed Lily willingly to the trailer's ramp. He hesitated only briefly at the threshold, his ears flicking nervously, but when Lily took a step inside, he sighed deeply and followed her, his hooves clanging softly on the metal floor. Carlos shook his head in amazement. "I've never seen him load that easily, not once in all the years I've known him." Dr. Martinez smiled knowingly. "Horses are excellent judges of character. He knows she's helping him." Once Thunder was safely loaded, the small convoy prepared to depart. James would drive their car, following Carlos in the truck and trailer. Dr. Martinez promised to stop by the next day to continue Thunder's treatment plan, and several others made arrangements to visit with supplies and assistance in the coming days. As they were about to leave, Frank Dempsey approached with an envelope. "The rodeo committee took up a collection," he explained, handing it to James. "It's not much, but it should help with Thunder's immediate needs." James was momentarily speechless, overwhelmed by the community's generosity. "Thank you," he finally managed. "I don't know what to say." Frank shook his head. "No need for thanks. What happened today reminded a lot of us why we got into this business in the first place. because we love horses. We just needed a brave young lady to remind us of that." He tipped his hat to Lily, who beamed with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. The drive to the Anderson farm took about 45 minutes, with James constantly checking his rearview mirror to ensure the trailer was still following safely behind. Beside him, Lily was uncharacteristically quiet, processing the extraordinary events of the day. "You know this is a big responsibility, right?" James said gently, breaking the silence. "Thunder will need a lot of care, especially in the beginning." Lily nodded solemnly. "I know, Dad, but I've been saving all my allowance for riding lessons. I can use that money for Thunder instead." James felt a surge of pride at his daughter's selflessness. "We'll figure out the money part together," he assured her. "I'm just making sure you understand that this is a long-term commitment. Thunder could live several more years with proper care." "Good," Lily said firmly. "I want him to live a long time. He deserves to be happy after everything he's been through." As they turned onto the gravel driveway leading to their modest farmhouse, James couldn't help wondering what his late wife would have thought of today's impulsive decision. Claire had been the horse lover in the family originally, the one who had insisted on buying this small property with its 5 acres of pasture and dilapidated old barn. She would have been proud of Lily. He was certain of that. The truck and trailer pulled up near the barn, and Lily was out of the car almost before it had stopped moving, eager to help Thunder into his new home. The Anderson farm was modest by any standard, a simple 2-bedroom farmhouse painted a fading yellow, a weathered red barn that had seen better days, and 5 acres of pasture enclosed by an aging but sturdy fence. It wasn't much compared to the sprawling Willow Creek Ranch where Thunder had spent his glory days, or even Reed's larger operation, but tonight, under the soft glow of the setting sun, it looked like paradise. Carlos backed the trailer up to the barn entrance with practiced ease. "Let's give him a minute to settle before we unload," he suggested, turning off the engine. The ride might have been stressful for him. Lily could hardly contain her excitement, but nodded in agreement. She understood that Thunder's comfort had to come first. While they waited, James and Carlos quickly prepared a stall in the barn, laying down fresh bedding that James had fortunately purchased the previous weekend for their garden. It wasn't ideal for a horse stall, but it would do for the night. "We'll need to get proper supplies tomorrow," James said, mentally calculating the costs and wondering how they would manage it all. The envelope from the rodeo committee was a blessing, but caring for a horse, especially one with special needs, was expensive. As if reading his thoughts, Carlos spoke up. "I know some folks who might have used equipment they'd be willing to donate, feed troughs, water buckets, that sort of thing, and I'd be happy to help out when I can while I'm looking for a new job." James clasped the man's shoulder gratefully. "We'd appreciate any help you can give. Neither Lily nor I know much about caring for horses, especially one in Thunder's condition." When everything was ready, they returned to the trailer. Lily approached the ramp, speaking softly to Thunder before it was even lowered. "We're home now, Thunder. You're going to love it here." Carlos carefully lowered the ramp, and Lily positioned herself where Thunder could see her. The old horse nickered softly when he spotted her. His ears perked forward with interest despite his exhaustion. "Come on, boy," Lily encouraged, stepping back to give him space. "Nice and easy." Thunder hesitated at first, sniffing the unfamiliar air cautiously. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he walked down the ramp and onto Anderson land, his new home. Each step was measured and careful, his arthritic joints clearly causing him discomfort. But there was a new alertness in his eyes as he surveyed his surroundings. "He looks better already," Carlos observed with a smile. "Less defeated." Thunder followed Lily to the barn, stopping occasionally to lower his head and sniff at the grass. Inside, the stall awaited him, clean, if somewhat makeshift. A bucket of fresh water had been placed in one corner, and James had found an old plastic tub that would serve as a temporary feed container. "Not exactly the Ritz," James said apologetically, "but we'll make improvements as we go." Thunder seemed unconcerned with the accommodations. He walked into the stall without hesitation, as if sensing that he was finally safe. Once inside, he turned in a careful circle, inspecting his new quarters, then lowered his head to sniff the bedding. Lily beamed as she watched him. "I think he likes it, Dad." "I think you're right," James agreed, surprised at how naturally Thunder had settled in. "But we should probably leave him to rest now. It's been a big day for all of us." Reluctantly, Lily stepped out of the stall. "Good night, Thunder. I'll see you first thing in the morning." As they secured the stall door, Thunder raised his head and gave a soft nicker, almost as if responding to Lily's farewell. The sound brought tears to her eyes, happy tears this time. Carlos declined their invitation to stay for dinner, saying he needed to return the truck and trailer before Reed noticed they were missing. "I'll stop by tomorrow if that's okay," he promised. "Bring some supplies and help you get set up properly." After Carlos left, James and Lily stood in the barn doorway looking back at Thunder's stall. The reality of what they had done was beginning to sink in. They had rescued a horse, an elderly, injured horse with special needs, and now they were responsible for his well-being. "Are we crazy, Dad?" Lily asked softly, voicing the question that had been hovering at the edges of James's mind. He put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "Maybe a little bit, but sometimes the craziest decisions are the ones that matter most. Your mom would have done exactly the same thing." Lily leaned into her father's embrace, comforted by the mention of her mother. Claire Anderson had passed away 3 years ago after a brief battle with cancer, leaving a void in their lives that still ached. She had been the one to nurture Lily's love of horses, taking her to her first riding lesson on her 7th birthday. "Mom would have loved Thunder," Lily said confidently. "Yes, she would have," James agreed. "And she would have been incredibly proud of what you did today." "I know I am." That night, after a simple dinner of sandwiches, neither of them had the energy to cook. Lily sat at the kitchen table with a notebook, making lists of everything Thunder would need. James watched her with a mixture of pride and concern, wondering how they would manage it all. But seeing the determination in his daughter's eyes, he knew they would find a way. Meanwhile, in the barn, Thunder settled into his first night of true peace in years. The soft bedding cushioned his aching joints, and the quiet of the countryside was a welcome change from the constant noise and activity of Reed's operation. For the first time in a long while, the old horse drifted into sleep without fear or pain as his dominant companions. Morning came with a brilliant sunrise that painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Lily was up and dressed before dawn, eager to check on Thunder. James, knowing his daughter's excitement, had set his alarm early as well. They found Thunder standing at the half door of his stall, his head extended to catch the first rays of sunlight. When he saw Lily, his ears pricked forward, and he nickered softly in greeting. "Good morning, Thunder," Lily called, rushing forward. "Did you sleep well? Are you hungry?" James followed more slowly, carrying a small bucket of water and a few carrots he'd found in the refrigerator. "We'll need to get proper feed today," he said, "but this will tide him over until we can make it to the store." As if on cue, the sound of tires on gravel announced the arrival of a visitor. A moment later, Dr. Martinez pulled up in her truck, followed closely by a second vehicle that turned out to be the feed store owner from the Rodeo, true to her word about delivering senior horse feed. "Thought you might need this first thing," the woman said cheerfully, gesturing to the bags in the back of her pickup. "Specially formulated for older horses with dental issues. Easy to chew and digest." Dr. Martinez approached with her medical bag. Thought I'd come by early and check on our patient before my regular appointments start. How did he do overnight?" James was momentarily overwhelmed by the generosity of these virtual strangers. "He seems to have settled in well," he managed, "and we can't thank you enough for all this." The feed store owner waved off his thanks. "It's nothing. The horse world is a small community. We take care of our own, and Thunder here is definitely one of ours." More visitors arrived throughout the morning. Carlos with a truckload of donated supplies, the farrier to continue work on Thunder's neglected hooves, and several local horse owners who had heard about the rescue and wanted to offer help and advice. By noon, the makeshift stall had been transformed with proper equipment, the feed room was stocked, and Thunder had been thoroughly examined, treated, and groomed. As the weeks passed, the Anderson farm settled into a new rhythm centered around Thunder's care. Each morning, Lily would wake early, eager to start her day with the old horse. She'd clean his stall while he grazed in the small paddock adjacent to the barn, then brush his coat until it began to regain some of its former luster. Under Dr. Martinez's guidance, she learned to check his legs for heat or swelling, to monitor his water intake, and to administer the various supplements that helped ease his arthritis. James watched with amazement as his daughter transformed before his eyes. The shy, somewhat timid girl who had struggled to find her place after her mother's death was blossoming into a confident, responsible young woman. She devoured books on horse care, peppered Dr. Martinez with questions during every visit, and maintained a detailed journal tracking Thunder's progress. Thunder, too, was changing. The defeated, pain-ridden animal from the rodeo gradually gave way to a more alert, engaged horse. His eyes brightened, and though he would never move without the stiffness of his condition, his steps became more assured. Most remarkable was his bond with Lily, which deepened with each passing day. He would nicker softly when he heard her voice, and often followed her around the paddock like an oversized dog, his head hovering just above her shoulder. "It's almost like he's protecting her," Carlos remarked one Saturday as he helped James repair a section of fencing. The former ranch hand had become a regular visitor, stopping by several times a week to assist with the heavier chores and to check on Thunder's progress. James nodded, watching as Lily sat in the grass reading a book, Thunder grazing contentedly beside her. "I think they're protecting each other in a way." Carlos had found work at a neighboring ranch, where the owner had been impressed by his knowledge and his integrity in standing up for Thunder at the rodeo. He still made time to help the Andersons, though, recognizing that they needed his expertise. 1 month after Thunder's arrival, Dr. Martinez conducted another thorough examination and was pleased with his improvement. "His weight is better, his coat is healthier, and his eyes are clear," she reported. "You're doing an excellent job with his care." Lily beamed at the praise, but the veterinarian wasn't finished. "However," she continued more seriously, "his arthritis isn't going to go away. We can manage it with medication and proper care, but he'll always have good days and bad days. And as he ages, the bad days might become more frequent." The sobering assessment reminded them all that Thunder's health was a complex, ongoing challenge. That very afternoon, as if to emphasize Dr. Martinez's point, a summer thunderstorm rolled in, bringing with it a dramatic drop in barometric pressure that left Thunder visibly uncomfortable, shifting his weight restlessly and occasionally wincing in pain. Lily stayed with him in the barn throughout the storm, speaking softly and applying the liniment Dr. Martinez had recommended for such occasions. James brought her dinner on a tray, his heart aching as he watched his daughter's distress over Thunder's discomfort. "Is he going to be okay, Dad?" Lily asked, her voice small with worry. James sat down on a bale of hay beside her. "Dr. Martinez said this would happen sometimes, remember? The weather affects his joints. But the storm will pass, and he'll feel better." Lily nodded, but her eyes remained troubled. "What about when winter comes? It'll be cold and damp for months." It was a valid concern, and one that James had been pondering himself. Their barn, while structurally sound, wasn't insulated, and Montana winters were notoriously harsh. "We'll figure something out," he promised, though he wasn't entirely sure how. The funds from the rodeo collection were dwindling rapidly, spent on Thunder's special feed, medications, and veterinary care. James's job as a high school science teacher provided a steady income, but not much in the way of extras, and the expenses of horse ownership were adding up faster than he had anticipated. That night, after Lily had finally been persuaded to come inside and get some sleep, James sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a growing sense of concern. The cost of properly insulating even a portion of the barn would be substantial, not to mention the ongoing expenses for Thunder's care. He was deep in thought when his phone rang. "James, it's Elaine Martinez. Sorry to call so late, but I've been thinking about Thunder and the coming winter." James was startled by the coincidence. "Actually, so have I. I'm trying to figure out how to insulate the barn, but it's going to be expensive." "That's partly why I'm calling," Dr. Martinez replied. "I mentioned Thunder's situation to a few clients, and there's quite a bit of interest in helping out. Would you be opposed to a fundraiser of sorts? Nothing fancy, maybe just a barbecue where people could meet Thunder and contribute what they can." James hesitated, his pride warring with practicality. "That's incredibly generous, but I don't want to impose on people's kindness. We made this commitment, and we should be the ones to follow through." "I understand," Dr. Martinez said gently. "But this isn't just about you and Lily. What happened at the rodeo affected a lot of people. Thunder has become something of a symbol, a reminder of the responsibility we all have toward the animals in our care. Helping him is a way for people to be part of something meaningful." Put that way, it was difficult to refuse. "When you put it like that, I guess we'd be honored by the help." Over the next few weeks, what had started as a simple fundraiser idea evolved into a full-fledged community event. The local equestrian club volunteered their grounds as a venue, businesses donated supplies and raffle prizes, and a retired contractor offered to oversee the barn insulation project at cost. Flyers appeared around town featuring a photo of Thunder and Lily, along with a tagline, "Help Thunder weather the winter." The day of the fundraiser dawned clear and warm, a perfect late summer Saturday. James and Lily arrived early to help set up, but found a small army of volunteers already at work erecting tents, arranging tables and stringing colorful bunting across the entrance. "Wow," Lily breathed, taking in the scene. "All this is for Thunder?" "Looks that way," James replied, equally amazed by the turnout. The question of whether to bring Thunder to the event had been debated extensively, with Dr. Martinez ultimately deciding that the trip would be too stressful for him. Instead, a local photographer had volunteered to create a display of professional photos showing Thunder's transformation, and a video station was set up where people could watch footage of his daily routine at the Anderson farm. By noon, the grounds were packed with visitors. Some were horse people who had followed Thunder's story from the beginning, while others were simply community members touched by the tale of a brave girl and a rescued horse. Children lined up to make donations and receive a Thunder's Friend badge in return, while adults bid generously on raffle items and silent auction offerings. As the event's guest of honor, Lily found herself the center of attention, repeatedly asked to recount the story of her confrontation with Reed at the rodeo. Though naturally shy, she rose to the occasion, her passion for Thunder's well-being overcoming her reticence. "I just couldn't stand seeing him in pain," she explained simply. "He'd given people so much joy when he was young and strong. He deserved better than to be treated that way when he got old." The fundraiser exceeded everyone's expectations, raising enough money not only to insulate the barn properly, but also to establish a small fund for Thunder's ongoing medical expenses. More importantly, It cemented Thunder's status as something of a local celebrity. People regularly drove by the Anderson farm hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous rescue horse, and Lily found herself fielding requests from school groups wanting to visit and learn about proper horse care. With James's guidance, she established a monthly Meet Thunder Day, where small groups could visit by appointment. These events became opportunities for education about responsible animal ownership and the special needs of elderly horses. Lily, once hesitant to speak in front of her class, now confidently explained Thunder's daily care routine and the importance of recognizing signs of pain or distress in animals. "She's found her voice," James remarked to Dr. Martinez during one of these events, watching with pride as his daughter fielded questions from a group of Girl Scouts. "She's found her purpose," the veterinarian corrected gently. "That's a powerful thing at any age, but especially for a child." As autumn painted the countryside in shades of gold and russet, the preparations for winter intensified. The barn insulation project was completed ahead of schedule, creating a cozy space where Thunder could be protected from the harsh Montana elements. Carlos and a few volunteers constructed an indoor exercise area where Thunder could move around safely on days when ice or snow made the paddock treacherous. A tack shop owner who had attended the fundraiser donated a collection of horse blankets, including several specifically designed for arthritic seniors. Lily spent hours researching the proper use of each, determined to keep Thunder comfortable through the coming cold months. All these preparations proved invaluable when winter arrived with sudden ferocity in mid-November. A blizzard swept through the region, dumping nearly 2 feet of snow overnight and sending temperatures plunging. Schools closed, roads became impassable, and the Anderson farm was transformed into a winter wonderland. Thunder, snug in his insulated stall with a thermal blanket over his back, weathered the storm in comfort. Lily, released from school duties by the snow day, spent hours in the barn with him, reading aloud from her favorite books as the wind howled outside. "You're spoiling that horse," James teased when he brought her hot chocolate in the afternoon. Lily looked up from her book with a smile. "He deserves to be spoiled after everything he went through." James couldn't argue with that. He had come to care deeply for Thunder himself, appreciating the old horse's gentle nature and the quiet dignity with which he carried himself, despite his physical limitations. There was a wisdom in Thunder's soft brown eyes that spoke of his long life and the hardships he had endured. December brought holiday festivities, and Thunder was not forgotten in the celebrations. Lily carefully hung a wreath of safe, horse-friendly greenery on his stall door and presented him with a special Christmas treat, a feed bucket filled with apple slices, carrots, and a drizzle of molasses. "Merry Christmas, Thunder," she whispered, hugging his neck as he investigated the offering with interest. The new year arrived with a fresh set of challenges. January brought a prolonged cold snap that tested the limits of the barn's insulation and Thunder's tolerance for confinement. On days when the temperature rose enough to be safe, Lily would bundle up and lead Thunder on short walks around the property, knowing that movement was essential for his arthritic joints despite the discomfort it sometimes caused. During one such walk, they encountered an unexpected visitor at the edge of the property. A sleek black SUV was parked on the road, and a man stood leaning against the fence watching them approach. Lily didn't recognize him at first, but Thunder did. The old horse stopped abruptly, his ears flattening against his head in a clear sign of distress. As they drew closer, Lily realized with a start that the man was Maxwell Reed. He looked different from the last time she had seen him at the rodeo. His expensive Western wear replaced by a more subdued outfit, his face somehow older and more lined. But there was no mistaking those cold eyes. Lily's first instinct was to turn around and head back to the barn, but something made her continue forward, one protective hand on Thunder's neck to reassure him. As they approached, Reed straightened up from his lounging position against the fence. "So this is where he ended up," he said, his voice carrying across the winter air. There was an odd note in it that Lily couldn't quite place, not exactly anger, but something more complex. "What do you want?" Lily asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "You can't have him back. The papers were signed." Reed gave a short, humorless laugh. "I'm not here for the horse, kid. He's worthless to me now." "Then why are you here?" Reed's gaze shifted from Lily to Thunder, and for a moment, something almost like regret flickered across his face. "Curiosity, I suppose. Wanted to see if he was still alive. Didn't expect he'd make it through the winter." Lily bristled at the casual cruelty of his words. "His name is Thunder, and he's doing just fine. He's healthy and happy here." Reed studied the old horse with a critical eye. "He looks better," he admitted grudgingly. "You've been taking good care of him." "Of course we have. That's what you're supposed to do with animals. Take care of them, not use them up and throw them away when they're not winning ribbons anymore." The blunt criticism seemed to strike a nerve. Reed's jaw tightened and he looked away momentarily. "You don't understand the business, kid. Horses are investments. When they stop paying dividends, you cut your losses." "That's not a business I'd ever want to be part of," Lily retorted, her initial fear giving way to indignation. "Thunder gave everything he had for his riders. He deserved better from you." Thunder, who had been standing tensely beside Lily, chose that moment to take a step forward. To Lily's surprise, the old horse extended his neck across the fence toward Reed, nostrils flared as he caught the man's scent. There was no aggression in the gesture, just a quiet curiosity that seemed at odds with his earlier distress. Reed hesitated, then slowly raised his hand and allowed Thunder to sniff it. For a brief moment, something softer crossed the man's face, a flicker of recognition, perhaps, or a memory of better days. "He was something special once," Reed said quietly, almost to himself. "Fastest barrel racer in 3 counties. Never saw another horse that could turn like him." Lily watched this unexpected interaction with confusion. "If you knew how special he was, why did you treat him so badly?" Reed withdrew his hand and stepped back, his expression closing off again. "Like I said, it's business. You're too young to understand." "I understand that being in business doesn't mean you have to be cruel," Lily countered. "My dad has a business. He teaches at the high school, but he doesn't hurt people to make money." Reed regarded her with an unreadable expression. "You're a strange kid, you know that? Most girls your age would be scared to talk to me like this." Lily shrugged, though her heart was still beating rapidly. "I'm not scared of you. I'm just sad for you." "Sad for me?" Reed repeated incredulously. "Why would you be sad for me?" "Because you had Thunder all those years and never realized how amazing he is. You only saw what he could do for you, not who he really is. That seems like a lonely way to live." The simple, heartfelt observation struck Reed with unexpected force. He stared at Lily for a long moment, then looked at Thunder again, seeing perhaps for the first time the intelligence and dignity in the old horse's gaze. Without another word, Reed turned and walked back to his SUV. Lily watched him drive away, a strange mixture of emotions swirling inside her. When the vehicle disappeared around the bend, she turned to Thunder and stroked his neck reassuringly. "It's okay," she murmured. "He's gone now. Let's go back to the barn." Thunder lowered his head slightly, nudging Lily's shoulder in what had become his characteristic gesture of affection. Together they made their way back to the warmth and safety of the barn. When James returned from school that afternoon, Lily told him about the encounter with Reed. His first reaction was concern for her safety, but as she described the conversation, his expression softened. "You told him you were sad for him?" James asked, shaking his head in amazement. "Lily, sometimes I think you're much wiser than your years." Lily shrugged, embarrassed by the praise. "I just said what I was thinking." "That's exactly what makes it wisdom," James replied. "Not many people have the courage to speak their truth so clearly, especially to someone like Reed." The visit from Reed, brief as it was, seemed to mark a turning point for Thunder. It was as if confronting his past had somehow freed him from it. In the days that followed, he appeared more relaxed, more present. His eyes followed Lily with increased attentiveness, and he began to show more interest in his surroundings, exploring corners of the paddock he had previously ignored. Dr. Martinez, during her monthly checkup, remarked on the change. "His physical condition is relatively stable," she reported, "but there's definitely an improvement in his mental state. He's more engaged, more curious. That's a very good sign." "Do you think he might actually be getting better?" Lily asked hopefully. The veterinarian chose her words carefully. "His arthritis isn't going away, Lily. But animals, like people, aren't just their physical conditions. Their emotional well-being matters too, and in that respect, Thunder is definitely improving. He feels safe here, and that makes a huge difference." As February gave way to March, the first tentative signs of spring began to appear. Patches of snow melted to reveal tender green shoots, and the days gradually lengthened, providing more opportunities for Thunder to spend time outside. He seemed to relish the changing season, often standing with his face turned toward the sun, soaking in its warmth. One sunny afternoon, as Lily was leading Thunder on their daily walk, she was surprised to see a familiar black SUV approaching the farm. Her heart raced momentarily, but as the vehicle drew closer, she realized that while it was the same make and model as Reed's, this one had a different license plate. The SUV parked near the house, and a woman stepped out, tall, elegantly dressed, with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She stood for a moment surveying the property, then spotted Lily and Thunder, and began walking toward them with purposeful strides. "Are you Lily Anderson?" she called when she was within earshot. Lily nodded cautiously, one hand protectively on Thunder's neck. "Yes, that's me." The woman smiled, some of the tension leaving her posture. "I'm Sarah Jenkins. I used to ride Thunder back when he was competing." Lily's eyes widened in recognition. "You're the one who set all those records with him. I've seen your pictures in the newspaper articles about Thunder." Sarah nodded, her gaze shifting to the old horse with unmistakable emotion. "That's right. We had some good years together." She approached slowly, respectful of Thunder's space. "May I?" Lily nodded, and Sarah extended her hand toward Thunder. The old horse stretched his neck forward, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. For a moment he was perfectly still. Then, with a soft nicker that Lily had come to recognize as his greeting, he nudged Sarah's palm. "He remembers me," Sarah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "After all this time, he still remembers." The revelation that Thunder recognized his former rider after so many years touched Lily deeply. She had known he was intelligent, but this evidence of his long memory, his capacity for attachment, was profoundly moving. "How did you find us?" she asked as Sarah gently stroked Thunder's forehead. "Max Reed, believe it or not," Sarah replied. "He called me out of the blue last month. Said he'd seen Thunder and thought I might want to know where he ended up. It took me a while to arrange time off work to make the trip." Lily was startled by this information. Reed had given no indication during their encounter that he planned to contact Thunder's former rider. Perhaps her words had affected him more than she'd realized. Sarah spent the afternoon with them, sharing stories of Thunder's glory days that filled in many of the gaps in what Lily knew about his past. She described his quirks, how he'd always nuzzle her pockets looking for treats, how he'd paw the ground impatiently when he was ready to run, how he seemed to understand the pattern of the barrels before they even entered the arena. "He was the smartest horse I ever rode," Sarah said fondly. "We just understood each other right from the start." "Why did you have to leave him behind?" Lily asked, the question that had been nagging at her since she'd learned of Sarah's existence. Sarah's expression clouded. "I didn't want to, but my husband got a job in Europe and we were going to be living in an apartment in the city. There was no way to bring Thunder with us. I thought I'd found him a good home with a family who promised to care for him as he aged." She shook her head sadly. "But they sold him to Reed after just a year. By the time I found out and came back to the States, Reed refused to sell him back to me. Said he was still valuable as a breeding stallion." "But Thunder's not a stallion," Lily said, confused. "He's a gelding." "Exactly," Sarah replied grimly. "Reed lied to those buyers, and by the time they discovered the truth, it was too late. That's the kind of person he is, or was. That's why I was so shocked when he called me about Thunder." When James returned home, he invited Sarah to stay for dinner. Over a simple meal of spaghetti and salad, they discussed Thunder's care and his future. Sarah was impressed by the setup they had created for him and the community support they had garnered. "You've done an amazing job," she told them sincerely. "Better than I could have hoped for him." As she prepared to leave, Sarah handed James an envelope. "I want to contribute to Thunder's care fund," she said firmly. "And I'd like to visit again if that's all right. Maybe become a regular part of his life again, in some small way." "Of course," James agreed readily. "You're welcome anytime. I'm sure Thunder would be happy to see you regularly." After Sarah had gone, promising to return the following month, Lily sat with Thunder in the quiet barn, processing all she had learned about his past. "You had a whole life before us," she said softly, running her fingers through his mane. "So many people who loved you, and then people who let you down. But you still trust, you still try. That's pretty amazing, Thunder." The old horse lowered his head to her level, his breath warm against her cheek. In his gentle brown eyes, Lily saw not just the pain of his past, but the wisdom it had given him, the capacity to distinguish between those who would hurt him and those who would help, and the courage to open his heart again despite previous betrayals. Spring arrived in full force, transforming the Anderson farm with vibrant green grass and wildflowers that dotted the pasture. With the warmer weather, Thunder seemed to gain new energy. Though his movements remained slow and deliberate, he spent more time exploring the paddock, often standing near the fence to watch the world go by, his ears pricked forward with interest at every passing car or singing bird. Sarah Jenkins became a regular visitor, stopping by once a month as promised. She always brought special treats for Thunder and spent hours with him and Lily, sharing stories and teaching Lily more about horsemanship. Through her, Lily learned techniques for stretching Thunder's stiff legs and massaging his sore muscles that complemented Dr. Martinez's medical treatments. "You have a gift with horses," Sarah told Lily one day as they watched Thunder dozing in the afternoon sun. "It's not something that can be taught. It's an instinct, a way of communicating without words." Lily blushed at the praise. "I just try to listen to what he's telling me." "Exactly," Sarah nodded. "That's the gift. Most people are too busy talking to listen." As Lily's 11th birthday approached in May, James found himself pondering what gift would be special enough to mark the occasion. His daughter had matured so much over the past 8 months, taking on responsibilities that many adults would find daunting, never complaining about the early morning barn chores or the limitations that Thunder's care placed on their activities. The answer came unexpectedly during a conversation with Carlos, who had become not just a helper but a friend to the Anderson family. "She needs her own saddle," Carlos said matter-of-factly. "Not for Thunder, of course, but for when she starts riding lessons again. The stable owner mentioned she's been asking questions about working there part-time when she's a little older." James was surprised. "She hasn't mentioned wanting to ride again. I thought she was focused on Thunder." Carlos smiled knowingly. "She doesn't want you to think she's dissatisfied with just caring for Thunder. But a horse person is a horse person. The desire to ride is always there. With Carlos's help, James selected a beautiful used Western saddle that was within his budget, but still of excellent quality. On Lily's birthday, they presented it to her in the barn, with Thunder watching curiously from his stall. Lily's eyes widened as she unwrapped the large package. "Dad, it's beautiful," she exclaimed, running her hands over the tooled leather with reverence. "But I don't understand. I don't have a horse to ride." "Not yet," James agreed. "But Thunder's not going to be your last horse, honey, and when you're ready for the next one, you'll have this waiting." Tears welled in Lily's eyes as she hugged her father tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's perfect." Later that day, as Lily sat in the paddock with Thunder, sharing her birthday cupcake with the old horse who delicately lipped the frosting from her palm, she found herself thinking about her father's words. The idea of another horse had never entered her mind. Thunder occupied all her thoughts and energy. But the saddle represented a future she hadn't allowed herself to envision, one where her love for horses continued beyond Thunder. The thought brought both comfort and sadness. Thunder was stable for now, but Dr. Martinez had been clear that his condition would eventually deteriorate. Every good day was a gift, not a guarantee. As if sensing her conflicted emotions, Thunder nudged Lily's shoulder gently, leaving a smear of frosting on her shirt. She laughed, the momentary melancholy broken by his antics. "You're right," she told him, wiping the frosting away. "No point worrying about tomorrow when today is so good." Summer arrived with a heat wave that posed new challenges for Thunder's care. The extreme temperatures exacerbated his arthritis, making him uncomfortable and irritable. Dr. Martinez prescribed a cooling regimen, frequent cold hosing of his legs, a fan installed in his stall, and access to shade at all times. Lily monitored him constantly, adjusting his routine to accommodate the weather. She moved his exercise sessions to the coolest hours of early morning, set up a sprinkler near his favorite shady spot that he could walk through if he chose, and froze buckets of water with carrots embedded in them as refreshing treats. During one particularly brutal week when temperatures soared into the high 90s, Lily slept in the barn, unable to bear the thought of Thunder suffering alone in the heat. James brought her meals and checked on her frequently, proud of her dedication but concerned about her intensity. "You need to take care of yourself too," he reminded her gently. "Thunder wouldn't want you making yourself sick on his account." Lily knew her father was right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that every moment with Thunder was precious, not to be wasted. This awareness of his mortality, unusual in a child her age, gave her a maturity beyond her years, but also a vulnerability that sometimes broke James's heart to witness. The heat wave finally broke with a magnificent thunderstorm that cooled the air and rejuvenated the parched landscape. Thunder, true to his name, was unperturbed by the dramatic weather, standing calmly in his paddock as lightning flashed across the sky. Lily, watching from the barn doorway, thought he looked majestic in that moment, a warrior unfazed by the elements, connected to the powerful forces of nature that shared his name. As summer progressed, Thunder's story continued to spread beyond their local community. A journalist from a regional newspaper visited the farm to write a feature article, which was picked up by several national publications. An equine welfare organization contacted them about making Thunder an ambassador for their campaign against premature retirement of sport horses. The attention was overwhelming at times, but Lily understood that Thunder's story had the power to help other horses in similar situations. With James's guidance, she agreed to limited media appearances and carefully managed visits from photographers and journalists. "Remember," James cautioned, "Thunder's welfare comes first. If any of this becomes too stressful for him, we pull the plug immediately." But Thunder seemed to relish the attention, perking up when visitors arrived and standing patiently for photographs. It was as if, after years of being valued only for his performance, He was finally being appreciated simply for being himself. One warm August evening, as Lily was completing Thunder's nighttime routine, she noticed something different in his demeanor. He stood at the paddock gate, gazing toward the distant hills with unusual intensity, his ears pricked forward and his nostrils flared. "What is it, boy?" she asked, following his gaze but seeing nothing unusual in the golden light of sunset. Thunder nickered softly, a sound she had come to recognize as his way of expressing contentment. He continued to stare at the horizon for several minutes, then turned to Lily and gently nuzzled her shoulder. In that moment, Lily felt a strange certainty that Thunder was seeing something beyond her human perception, perhaps memories of his younger days racing across open fields, or some equine understanding of the natural world that humans couldn't access. Whatever it was, she respected his private communion with it, standing quietly beside him until he was ready to return to the barn. That night, as she brushed his coat to a soft shine, Lily found herself talking to Thunder about the future, something she usually avoided, preferring to focus on the present. "I don't know how much time we have," she said softly, "but I promise to make every day count. And when you're gone, I'll remember everything you taught me. I'll use it to help other horses, just like we're doing now with your story." Thunder turned his head to look at her, his wise brown eyes reflecting the soft light of the barn lantern. In his gaze, Lily saw understanding, acceptance, and something that looked remarkably like pride. Autumn arrived with a painter's palette of red and gold, transforming the landscape around the Anderson farm. Thunder seemed to appreciate the cooler temperatures, moving with slightly more ease as the summer heat faded. His daily routine now included longer walks with Lily, venturing beyond the paddock to explore the edges of the property where fallen leaves created a colorful carpet underfoot. As the first anniversary of Thunder's rescue approached, Lily began planning a small celebration. "Nothing elaborate," she assured her father. "Just a few people who have been important to Thunder's journey. A way to say thank you." The event, held on a crisp October Saturday, brought together the core group who had supported Thunder throughout the year: Dr. Martinez, Carlos and his family, Sarah Jenkins, the feed store owner, and a few others who had become regular visitors to the farm. They gathered in the paddock where Lily had hung festive garlands of apples and carrots for Thunder to enjoy. "A year ago today," Lily said, addressing the small crowd with newfound confidence, "I saw Thunder for the first time. He was suffering, and I was scared, but something inside me knew I had to help him." She looked around at the gathered faces, her eyes bright with emotion. "I never imagined that trying to help one horse would bring so many wonderful people into our lives. Thank you all for being part of Thunder's family." The celebration was simple but heartfelt, with cake for the humans and a special mash for Thunder, complete with a carrot candle that he delicately removed and crunched with evident enjoyment. As the afternoon progressed, Lily noticed Maxwell Reed's black SUV parked at the edge of the property, its driver watching from a distance without approaching. She chose not to mention it to the others, sensing that Reed needed to observe rather than participate. Later, after the guests had departed, Lily found a small package on the porch with no note or card. Inside was a vintage ribbon from a barrel racing championship, faded but still vibrant, with Thunder and Sarah Jenkins barely legible on its surface. She understood immediately that it was from Reed, a silent acknowledgement, perhaps even an apology, offered in the only way he knew how. The next morning, she carefully mounted the ribbon on a small wooden plaque and hung it on Thunder's stall door, where he could see it. Whether he recognized the object from his past, she couldn't tell, but he did examine it with interest, sniffing it thoroughly before returning to his hay. As winter settled over Montana once more, Thunder's physical condition began to show subtle signs of decline. Dr. Martinez increased his pain medication and added new supplements to his diet. But there was no denying that the cold affected him more severely than the previous year. Lily redoubled her efforts, spending every available moment ensuring his comfort. She heated his water to encourage drinking, massaged his joints with warming liniment, and kept his stall deeply bedded with fresh straw. James watched his daughter's dedication with a mixture of pride and concern. "You're doing everything possible," he assured her, when he found her in tears after a particularly difficult day, when Thunder had struggled to rise from his straw bed. "Remember what Dr. Martinez said. There will be good days and bad days." Lily nodded, wiping away her tears. "I know. I just hate seeing him in pain." The bad days became more frequent as winter deepened, but there were still good ones. Days when Thunder would stand alertly at his paddock gate, ears pricked forward as he watched a flock of geese overhead, or when he would playfully toss his feed bucket, demanding attention like a much younger horse. On those days, Lily would snap photos to add to the journal she had been keeping since Thunder's arrival. The thick notebook had become a detailed chronicle of his journey, filled with observations, memories, and insights that reflected not just Thunder's story but Lily's growth alongside him. In January, a particularly severe cold snap kept Thunder confined to his stall for several days. Despite the barn's insulation, the bitter temperatures made it too dangerous for him to venture outside. Lily rearranged her school schedule to spend every possible moment with him, reading aloud from her favorite books, grooming his coat until it gleamed, and simply sitting beside him in companionable silence. On the third day of confinement, Sarah Jenkins arrived unexpectedly, her SUV navigating the snow-covered driveway with careful determination. She carried a large bag filled with special treats and a thick handmade horse blanket. "I was worried about him in this cold," she explained as she entered the barn, stomping snow from her boots. "Thought he might need some extra warmth." Together, they draped the new blanket over Thunder, who accepted the additional layer with stoic patience. Sarah then produced a small, portable speaker from her bag and set it up near his stall. "I used to play music for him before competitions," she told Lily. "It always seemed to calm him. Thought it might help pass the time while he's stuck inside." The gentle classical music filled the barn with soothing melodies, and Thunder's ears flicked forward with interest. As the familiar sounds washed over him, he visibly relaxed, his eyes softening and his breathing becoming deeper and more regular. "He remembers," Lily whispered, amazed once again by the depth of Thunder's memories and associations. Sarah nodded, her eyes moist. "Horses never forget the good things in their lives, even when they've experienced a lot of bad. It's a kind of wisdom we could all learn from." The cold snap finally broke after 5 days, allowing Thunder to return to his outdoor routine. Though still stiff and slow, he seemed rejuvenated by the fresh air and open space, taking time to roll in a patch of snow with unexpected playfulness that left both Lily and James laughing in delight. February brought another challenge when Thunder developed a minor respiratory infection. Dr. Martinez prescribed antibiotics and advised close monitoring, but assured them that with proper care he should recover fully. "His age makes everything a bit more complicated," she explained, "but his overall condition is remarkably good considering all he's been through. You've given him a quality of life that many horses half his age don't have." Lily took the prescribed medication from the veterinarian with trembling hands. "But he will get better, right?" Dr. Martinez met her gaze directly, knowing that Lily valued honesty above false comfort. "I believe he will overcome this particular infection, yes. But Lily, you know that Thunder's journey is in its later chapters. Our goal has always been to make those chapters as comfortable and joyful as possible, not to pretend the book doesn't have an end." Lily nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand. I just want more time." "Time is precious," Dr. Martinez agreed softly. "But it's the quality of that time that matters most, not just the quantity. And in that respect, Thunder is truly blessed. The infection lingered for 2 weeks, during which Lily barely left Thunder's side. She administered his medication, steamed his stall to ease his breathing, and monitored his temperature and appetite with meticulous care. Finally, his symptoms began to subside, and his energy gradually returned. One crisp morning in early March, Lily arrived at the barn to find Thunder standing alertly at his stall door, nickering a greeting as soon as he saw her. The spark had returned to his eyes, and he moved with purpose as she led him to the paddock for his daily exercise. "You're feeling better today, aren't you?" she said, relief evident in her voice. Thunder responded by breaking into a slow, stiff trot, the first time he had done so voluntarily in months. Though it lasted only a few strides before he returned to his careful walk, the brief display of energy felt like a victory. As spring unfurled across the Montana landscape, Thunder experienced what Dr. Martinez called his second wind, a period of relative stability and improved energy that seemed to defy the veterinarian's cautious prognosis. His daily walks with Lily extended further around the property, and he showed renewed interest in his surroundings, often pausing to investigate wildflowers or watch birds building their nests in the eaves of the barn. Lily, now approaching her 12th birthday, had grown taller and more confident over the past year and a half. Her knowledge of equine care had expanded exponentially, absorbing wisdom from Dr. Martinez, Sarah, Carlos, and her own careful observations of Thunder's needs and responses. She had become something of a local expert on senior horse care, occasionally invited to speak at 4-H meetings or community events about her experience with Thunder. "It's amazing to see the difference in both of them," Dr. Martinez remarked to James during a routine checkup visit in late April. "When I first examined Thunder, I honestly wasn't sure he'd make it through that first winter. And Lily was so tentative then, so unsure of herself. Now look at them." They watched as Lily led Thunder through a series of gentle stretching exercises she had developed specifically for his arthritic condition. The old horse followed her guidance with trust and patience, and she responded to his cues with an intuitive understanding that couldn't be taught from books. "They healed each other," James said simply. May brought another milestone when the local newspaper featured Thunder and Lily in a follow-up article for its annual Community Heroes issue. The photographer captured a striking image of the pair standing in the pasture at sunset, Thunder's graying muzzle resting gently on Lily's shoulder, both of them gazing toward the horizon with a serenity that seemed to transcend the ordinary relationship between human and animal. The article detailed the changes in Thunder's condition since his rescue, the community support that had rallied around him, and the educational outreach that had grown from his story. It concluded with a quote from Lily that touched readers across the state. "Thunder taught me that it's never too late to start over, and that being old or injured doesn't mean you can't still have purpose and dignity. Every living being deserves respect and kindness, especially in their golden years." Letters poured in from readers moved by Thunder's story, many sharing their own experiences with elderly or rescued animals. Lily read each one aloud to Thunder, who seemed to listen with interest, his ears flicking forward at the sound of her voice. As spring gave way to summer once more, Lily noticed subtle changes in Thunder's behavior. He began to seek out quiet, secluded spots in the paddock, sometimes standing for hours gazing toward the distant mountains. His appetite remained good, and he showed no signs of acute distress. But there was a new quality to his stillness, a profound patience, as if he were listening to some distant call that human ears couldn't detect. Dr. Martinez, during her June visit, conducted a thorough examination and found no significant change in his physical condition beyond the expected progression of his arthritis. But when Lily described his new behaviors, the veterinarian nodded knowingly. "Horses are incredibly intuitive about their own journeys," she explained gently. Sometimes they seem to understand things about life and death that we can only guess at. Just keep doing what you're doing. Follow his lead. Give him the space he seems to need, but stay close enough that he knows you're there. Lily took this advice to heart, adapting her care routine to Thunder's changing preferences. On days when he sought solitude, she would sit quietly nearby, reading or sketching, a reassuring presence without demands. On days when he seemed to want companionship, she would groom him for hours, telling him stories or simply sharing the comfortable silence that had become their special language. July brought scorching temperatures that posed challenges for Thunder's comfort. Lily set up a misting system near his favorite shady spot and kept his water fresh and cool. Despite the heat, he seemed content, particularly in the early mornings and evenings when the air was more comfortable. It was during one such evening, as the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, that Lily sensed a change in Thunder. He had been standing at the far end of the paddock, facing the mountains as had become his habit, but when she approached, he turned to her with a look of such profound awareness that she felt it like a physical touch. Slowly, deliberately, Thunder walked to where Lily stood by the fence. He lowered his head until his muzzle was level with her face, his breath warm and sweet from the fresh hay he'd been eating. His eyes, those deep pools of wisdom and experience, seemed to hold all the stories of his life, the triumphs of his youth, the hardships of his middle years, and the peace he had found in this final chapter. Lily understood without words that he was saying goodbye. "It's okay," she whispered, tears streaming down her face even as she smiled for him. "You've given so much. You deserve your rest." Thunder nudged her cheek gently, then turned and walked with surprising steadiness back to his spot facing the mountains. Lily watched him for a long time, memorizing every detail: the proud arc of his neck despite his age, the way his mane still caught the golden light, the dignity in his stance that years of hardship had never diminished. When darkness fell, she reluctantly returned to the house, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what was coming, but also filled with gratitude for every moment they had shared. The next morning, James found Lily sitting beside Thunder in the paddock, her hand resting on his still warm neck. The old horse had passed peacefully in the night, lying in his favorite spot with his head facing the distant peaks. There was no sign of struggle or distress. He had simply closed his eyes for the last time, his long journey complete. The days that followed were difficult, but Lily faced her grief with the same courage and compassion she had shown throughout Thunder's care. She worked with James and Carlos to create a special resting place for Thunder beneath the large oak tree that shaded the eastern corner of the paddock. There they laid him to rest with his championship ribbon, a lock of his mane preserved in a small glass vial, and countless tears of both sorrow and celebration. Word of Thunder's passing spread quickly through the community that had embraced him. Flowers, cards, and messages of support arrived daily. Sarah Jenkins drove up immediately upon hearing the news, and she and Lily spent a long afternoon sharing memories and looking through photographs, honoring Thunder's life in all its chapters. Perhaps most surprising was the arrival of Maxwell Reed, who came alone one evening a week after Thunder's passing. He stood awkwardly at the paddock gate, hat in hand, clearly uncomfortable but determined to pay his respects. "I'm sorry about Thunder," he said gruffly when Lily approached. He was a good horse." "Yes, he was," Lily agreed simply. Reed shifted his weight, struggling to find the right words. "What you did for him, it made me think about things differently, about how we treat the animals in our care." He paused, then added quietly, "I've made some changes at my place. No more sending the older ones to slaughter. They get proper retirement now." The news that Thunder's story had changed Reed's practices affected Lily deeply. It was perhaps the most meaningful tribute to the old horse's legacy, that even in death, he continued to improve the lives of others. 1 month after Thunder's passing, on what would have been his 25th birthday, the Anderson farm hosted a special gathering. Friends, supporters, and community members came together not to mourn, but to celebrate the impact of one horse's life and the courage of one girl who had refused to look away from suffering. During the gathering, Dr. Martinez unveiled a surprise, a small bronze plaque to be installed on the oak tree above Thunder's resting place. It bore a simple inscription that captured the essence of his story. Thunder, 1998-2023, champion in the arena, hero in our hearts. His courage taught us to stand up for those who cannot speak. His forgiveness taught us the healing power of compassion. His dignity taught us that every life deserves respect until its final breath. As Lily read the words aloud, her voice clear and strong despite her tears, a gentle breeze stirred the oak's leaves, sending dappled sunlight dancing across the gathering. In that moment, she felt Thunder's presence as surely as if he stood beside her, not in sorrow, but in the joyful continuation of a journey they had begun together and would, in different ways, carry forward throughout their lives.